talk is real-time collaborative sessions for new contributors and maintainers. And as stated, I'm the community manager for the University of California network of OSPOs, and OSPO is Open Source Program Office. And so that sort of means that I'm managing 7 communities, or depending on how you count it, because we have 6 campuses with OSPOs, but we actually serve all 10 campuses, but we also have 6 health centers and 3 national labs and the California Digital Library and a whole bunch of other raccoons in this trench coat, and I don't even know who all of them are. So that is good fun. Okay. So we have 2 different conversations that I find myself having. One with new contributors and one with maintainers of projects that they would like to open up to receive contributions, but they're not sure that they can provide the scaffolding that contributors need to be successful. So new contributors are often saying, like, I really want to contribute, but I don't know where to start, and I can give them, like, oh, okay, here are these resources that you can read in order to learn how to become a contributor to an open source project. And they might read them and then come back to me and say, but I still am not sure that I know what to do. And then, similarly, new maintainers might be saying, like, I really want to accept contributions, but I don't know how to write a README, and I don't know how to write a contributing.md, and I can give them templates and I can give them all this stuff, and they'll be like, great, and then they come back and they're like, I'm not sure that I know what to do. And what I realized is that basically what these 2 groups need is exactly the same thing. They need the hand-holding. Like, they want me to, like, sit with them while they get going with this. And I completely understand that because I was there too. So, but I don't scale, right? But the projects do. So we have a hidden parallel between the needs of new contributors and the needs of new, not necessarily new maintainers exactly, but new maintainers or new maintainers who are new to the idea of accepting contributions. New maintainers for short, because that's otherwise a lot of words. And things that these groups both need are permission to not know things. Contributors need to be able to see maintainers model not knowing the answers to every question right off the tops of their heads. And newer maintainers need to see more experienced maintainers model giving feedback on PRs and answering questions. And real-time feedback is often necessary to help people feel secure. And I love asynchronous communication. I am actually personally on a mission within the OSPO network to radically increase the amount of asynchronous communication that we are doing. However, that feeling of security that comes from getting feedback in real time just really cannot be replaced. And especially if what people are trying to get feedback on is kind of a tricky thing, and trickiness can come both in terms of technical complexity and in terms of human complexity. And we kind of treat these like they're distinct problems, like these are the needs of new contributors and these are the needs of new maintainers, but they're really, really parallel problems, and we can work on them simultaneously. So the kinds of discussions that really benefit from human delivery are, like, for new contributors, they might be struggling with how much detail to include in their commit messages. They want to know what kinds of questions they can ask in the main channel, or if they formatted a PR correctly. New maintainers want to know how they can give feedback without discouraging people, and what's the right balance of a thorough versus welcoming. And they want to know if they're being too picky or not picky enough. And so to say yes and to Carol's question this morning, or the question posed to Carol this morning about handling things like PRs that might not be exactly what a project needs, but you don't want to alienate the contributor. If contributors can get feedback in real time, early and often, like Elaine was saying, then they might be submitting PRs that are more precisely relevant to your projects. And it's also easier to have conversations that require trust when there's already a social context that's established. So how can we do that? Nope, that's the next slide. One last bit before that is the open source reality is that docs, or it didn't happen, is pretty hard to maintain when everybody's working on projects that are just in their free time. And it's hard enough to get the docs written for the code base, kind of never mind documenting processes and cultural norms. So what can we do about this? We can have tech hangs, which are maybe kind of like multiplayer office hours. You might be familiar with community calls for open source projects, and this is distinct from that. It's not like a report out. It's more like a co-working session. So they're like real-time, really, really casual, collaborative video calls. And new contributors get the benefit of watching experienced maintainers work. Maintainers can get practice explaining their thinking or their code base. And everyone can ask questions without feeling judged. And it's a lot easier to convey tone when you're speaking than it is when you're writing or reading. And cultural norms can emerge through observation, and you can do some hand-holding when people need it. And this idea came to me when I was talking to maintainers and realizing that they were having those parallel challenges that I had already been hearing about from contributors. So the same session can serve both populations. So what a tech hang might look like is a regular schedule. So maybe it's not every week, maybe it's every other week or something, but it's at a regular cadence. People know when to expect to find other people in the co-working session, the tech hang. There's not an agenda, and that's one of the ways that it's very distinct from the community call model. And newcomers are explicitly welcome. No question should be considered to be too basic here, and people can work independently when they're available for questions, or can pop themselves into a breakout room or something to be like, I need, so-and-so and I are gonna go work on this thing sort of focused for a bit, and then we'll come back. And I have a couple of real examples of this that I've seen in action. I'm sure these are not the only two instances of this model, but these are the two that I've seen. The team for the Astro, this is Astro, the web framework, not the database. Their docs team has a weekly talking and docking session, which used to be held through video call on Discord, but is now streamed on YouTube. And those are collaborative documentation sessions, and they walk through PRs, and so that people can really see what the PR review process is like, and also what the maintainers of the docs are really looking for in their projects in ways that are hard to convey concisely in writing, but if you are watching the process of somebody saying, oh, okay, so I can see what you were doing here, and that's a little bit not quite what we were looking for, because what we were looking for was maybe more like this, or the other way around. I was thinking of it more like this, but your way is actually way better for these reasons. Just all that like thinking out loud is really hard to capture in documentation, and this is sort of a way to do it. You might have a mix of experienced writers and newcomers in any one of these talk and doc sessions. And there'll be sort of a real-time discussion about the style norms very often. The other example of this model that I know about is one that I participate in regularly. I'm the docs lead for the DistributeAid team, and DistributeAid is a global humanitarian logistics platform, shipping aid to all over. We're in Gaza and Kyiv and all kinds of places. So, but there's a tech side to that, because there are databases and there are websites and there are all kinds of interfaces that people are interacting with. And so we have been putting together docs for all of these technical projects, because they didn't previously have any docs at all. And so what these sessions might look like are like impromptu screen sharing sessions, so that people can see like a walkthrough of how to set up Gitpod, or walking through deployment processes, or explaining the code review culture in real time. You might see people working out what the norms ought to be, like what the norms are now, and what the norms maybe we want to change the way that we do, or the way that we approach a thing. Oops. Yeah, okay. And there are some absolutely magical moments that can take place in these sessions. So new contributors get to see that experienced people also don't know things, and see how those real conversations happen in reviews, and really importantly, getting that immediate, like, yes, that's right, confirmation, because especially new contributors are likely to doubt their own abilities, or think, oh, okay, I did this, but maybe that's not right, and maybe I'll back off and not actually do this. But if there's somebody there to be like, no, yes, this is right, you've got it, then they're much more likely, it's sort of stickier in that sense. They're much likelier to stick around if they can get that feedback really quickly. And for new maintainers, they can practice giving explanations with a safety net, because there will be other maintainers there too. And so they know, like, if they say something that isn't quite right, like, oh, you said that this, this function works like this way, or this feature works this way, but it actually works this slightly different way, in a way that matters, and they'll know that they're not going to be accidentally misleading new contributors. And they can learn what new contributors get stuck on. And this is huge, because when, everybody knows that when you're working on a project, if you have been building up your code base, and maybe even you're writing your docs, and it all makes complete sense to you, you are the worst qualified person on the planet to assess whether or not this all makes sense, and your documentation is complete and correct. However, the person who is best positioned to make that assessment is somebody who is brand new to your project, or at least brand new to viewing the code base through a maintainer's eyes and writing that documentation. And so this is probably the most valuable contribution that a tech hang can bring to a project, is just in getting that feedback about maybe how your entire project works, or how your documentation is written, or anything like that. So, and maintainers can build confidence through these successful interactions. So what would this look like, or what could it look like? I've put together a little framework, and these aren't rules, obviously, but just to give people an idea of what something would look like. So you really just start small, and you're going to pick one recurring time slot and invite 2 or 3 experienced people to be regulars. It's really helpful if you have a core group of people who are usually there, so that those relationships can form. And then you just post in your community wherever you talk to your community, whether it's on Discord or Slack or GitHub discussions, like, hey, we're going to have these sessions, co-working sessions, tech hangs, whatever you want to call them. You can come work with us. You definitely want to create safety. I strongly recommend making video optional. I know that a lot of people really have a hard time feeling like they're connecting to people if their cameras are not on. But there are people for whom, for instance, some types of neurodivergence make it really uncomfortable for people to have their cameras on. And also, it's an accessibility issue in terms of internet access. So, for instance, on the distributed team, we have lots of contributors who are in lots of different countries. Like some are in Nigeria, for instance. We have a lot of folks in Nigeria, and sometimes their internet, their bandwidth just isn't sufficient to support video. And you don't want to ask people why they're not turning on their cameras, because then you could be putting them on the spot, like, please divulge your medical information to me, or please explain to me why your internet connection isn't as good as mine. So you want to make the video optional. You want to explicitly state, probably more than once, that we're not going to be judgmental, like there are no dumb questions, or alternatively, please ask the questions that you think, that you're afraid might be dumb questions, because those can be the most valuable questions. And you want to make sure that the experienced people are modeling vulnerability. So if people can think about, like, I could review this PR of so-and-so's now, or I could wait and I could do it tomorrow morning when we're in the tech hang. Check with that person in advance, make sure that that's cool with them. And then you can walk through that process of doing the code review. And then the person whose code is being reviewed can model that vulnerability for new contributors. And you want to make it sustainable. If only one person in your project is responsible for keeping these going, then that's not the most resilient sort of operation. And you want to let it evolve organically. Don't have too strict, too rigid of an idea of exactly the way that everything needs to be, because every project is different, every group of people is going to be different, and so you can figure things out as you go along. And you want to focus on connection over agenda. I would honestly recommend not having much of an agenda at all, but if you really feel like you need to have one, definitely prioritize the connections with the humans over sticking precisely to your agenda. And what you can say, if you're wondering, like, how do I describe to people what we're doing here? You can just say we're having informal work sessions where people collaborate in real time. Experienced contributors will be around to answer questions, and newcomers are explicitly welcome. No agenda, we're just getting stuff done and helping each other out. You can come work with us or alongside us, whichever. How do we know if it's working? Because the control group would be the people who come by, they're thinking, I might like to contribute to this project. And then they say, okay, well, I don't think that I'm ready to contribute to this project. I don't feel like I know very well how to contribute to this project. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. Never mind. you never know that those people stopped by. So the control group just leaves without saying anything. And so we can't really measure it that way. But what we can measure is whether the time from first contact with somebody who does make contact to when they make their first contribution, if that time is decreasing, then that's a pretty good indication that this is working. You can send out contributor confidence surveys. I've seen these set up in pull request templates so that once people submit to their PR, they get sort of a feedback survey, like how did this go for you? And then the retention after the first contribution. So especially if people are frequently making as their first contributions, just like, I just fixed a typo or something like that, which is a great first contribution. But do they come back and make more? Or was that all that they felt empowered to do? And then the number of basic questions that you get in PRs, those should decrease. And in general, you should be hearing from people that they felt welcome here. So this matters because we have existing metrics for checking out how things are going after people have started contributing, like the Chaos project. But we are missing those crucial early moments when people decide whether or not they belong. So tech hangs address the pre-contribution barriers that the traditional metrics just can't capture, and they help build stronger communities. And I am personally someone for whom it was definitely true that I came for the language but stayed for the community. And so that Pythonic ethos of building really strong communities is bolstered by having tech hangs in your projects. So your next steps for your project would be to pick a time, invite 2 or 3 experienced people to commit to showing up, post openly, and start quickly. Don't overthink it. If you set yourself we're starting on this date and you announce it, then once you're committed, then you can just do it. And the magic is in that human connection, not in the perfect process. So you don't need to wait until you feel like, oh yes, we have this great plan for these amazing tech hangs that we're going to hold, because you're probably never going to get to that point. So thank you again for not leaving before my talk. And if you'd like to find me, you can find me in all of these places. Thank you very much.